Welcome to episode 5 of the National Running PodShow. Here's what we've got coming up this week. Our headline interview this week is with the energetic Colin Jackson. The co-founders of Runr, the clothing brand, are here to talk us through their kit. Something slightly different in tech this week as we feature Shokz. Set your sights on races abroad with Sports Stores International. All things gels this week in nutrition with Tom Hollis. And in advice, Arj is here to tell us exactly what a performance coach is. And of course, our amazing sponsors, Runderwear, are giving away yet another £100 voucher, so check out this episode's and all the vouchers in the previous ones as well.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 5 of the National Running Show Pod Show, sponsored by Runderwear. Thank you very much for sticking with us. I cannot believe we have made it to episode 5. Fingers crossed we make it to episode 6. We shall see. Today we have Colin Jackson joining us as our special guest. But before we get into that, we're going to have a little chat about nutrition. Before we talk to the guys, please remember to enter the competition for the Runderwear £100 voucher. Follow the notes in the show notes on how to make that happen, or head over to the Runderwear website and use the code PODSHOW to get a 10% discount. So, we're going to talk nutrition, guys. I want to hear your number one thing for nutrition on races. What you got, Elise?
So, when we did the National Running Show 2018, Mike made us run here from Birmingham.
Okay, we need to explain this a little bit more. So, 2018 was the first. I will give the background.
It was strongly encouraged.
Slight pressure.
Yeah.
So it was the first ever year that we ran the National Running Show. It was pretty damn cold, right?
Yeah, snowing.
Yeah, snowing really badly. And we decided it would be a great PR vehicle in the week leading up to the run show to run from the Olympic Park in London to the NEC alongside a canal. And we did it over 5 days, I think, and it was a marathon and a bit a day. Yeah. And we thought it'd be great to get a load of speakers and influencers to do it. Great idea. It wasn't a great idea, was it?
Well, also, we didn't really get any content or anything, so it was just us going for a run.
Yeah, we just ran. We didn't even post much about it. No one cared. It was, but there was. Do you remember there was one other guy who ran from Wales to the show as well?
Inspired.
And he was inspired by. He was the one guy who was inspired, and he was posting pictures of him sleeping in like snow-covered fields.
Is he the guy that's sleeping outside waiting for it to open?
Yeah. He's never left actually. He now lives at the NEC. But no, it was amazing. So. Okay, we did that. Everybody got injured. It was a disaster. Yeah. My foot looked like an elephant leg by the time we got here. We injured half the speakers, but it was a great bonding experience, right?
Yeah, so, I still had a full-time job then. I took a whole week off work for that experience. But when we, so Hannah and Emily from Twice the Health were there, and every morning at the breakfast buffet, they had this station out of Warburton sandwich thins.
Warburton thins.
And I think they had peanut butter and honey in theirs. And honestly, that is now my absolute go-to. So if I came round to your house for lunch and you gave me a sandwich in a sandwich thin, I'd think that's not a proper sandwich. Where's the real bread? But for running, it's perfect. Yeah. I get really bored of sweet things, so I always do Marmite, or you can do cheese if you don't like Marmite, or peanut butter and jam work if you do want something sweet. Doesn't matter if they get squashed because they're already flat. Cut them into quarters, perfect little bite-sized pieces, and I really look forward to them. So
I think that's really good because actually bread's quite hard to chew, and actually people who do ultra running will tell you that as the races get longer, it's actually quite hard to chew and often to swallow. So actually thinner bread, I use wraps and things like that, but it's very similar. So Warburton's thins, great tip. Yeah, Jamie, what you got?
That is good learning. Dropping porridge. So
what's dropping porridge?
Yeah, so I used to eat porridge before long runs and think, 3 hours before.
I thought there was a special type of porridge.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I get it from
it's
a special
porridge, it only comes from a distance.
No, I just dropped it out of my whole cycle of long running and it transformed how I felt on runs, which is amazing. And but that doesn't mean it works for everyone, like we said. But for me, it just transformed how I felt more energetic. I felt lighter. It was a hindrance to me.
And what do you have now instead?
So I've got energy bars, and I'm a bit lighter. I'm going in a bit lighter. So maybe a couple of bananas, a few nuts, nothing too crazy.
Lighter, I think, is really interesting because when I started running, everybody told me to carb load.
That's what I mean.
And Massively overeat. And I'd get to the start line, I'd be like, bloated and I felt heavy, and I get exactly what you mean.
100%. And so I started tinkering around with long runs, testing it, and thinking, right, how light can I go?
Yeah.
Before I actually like hit the wall or whatever on a long run. And so I was taking it back. And actually, I've taken it back in it. You find that sweet spot. I didn't actually need half the amount of calories. But I would say jelly babies are my go-to on a big one. I do like a jelly baby.
I don't do sugar. So this is where nutrition is really important, because everyone's got their own thing. But
exactly.
For me, sugar, if I what goes up comes down. So you end up chasing the sugar rush, right?
I also think it's what's balancing, what's nutritionally optimum with what like makes you feel good and what you'll actually eat. So I just can't get through bars and stuff. And the same as like if maybe that amount of carbs is good, but if it makes you feel really heavy, like I find in ultra stuff, I, as well as sandwich thins, do really well on quite like high fat foods like cheese, salami. I think we talked about that last week, which nutritionally you'd say that's not what you need at all. You need sugar and carbs, but it makes me feel great. I look forward to it. I can eat loads of it, get loads of calories in. So I think it's worth balancing those things.
Yeah, cheese is definitely great. I had a burger. So I did the Daytona 100, which is a 100-mile race in America. I did that last year. And I got my vegan crew member to get me a burger from a service station, which was heated in a microwave. And I swear on my life, it was the greatest thing I've ever put in my mouth. It was flipping incredible. Yeah. And it just, you eat what you feel at the right time, right? And in ultras, you can generally eat like an absolute savage anyway and get away with it.
Yeah, I think it's a different world. Yeah. A different world of nutrition.
Yeah.
Because at the speed level, right, you've got to be really conscious.
It's just tinkering, yeah. So, and I've done ultras, and coming to that potato with salt. Oh, it's so good.
Potatoes with salt.
Yeah, new potatoes, boil them the night before, a bit of salt inside of a bag, and then they're ready to go in the morning, cold, into the pack, done.
Chuck it out here, guys. Yeah. I reckon the next series of this, we're going to get sponsored by some kind of potato farm.
Yeah.
I think that's the way forward.
Well, I spend so much time talking about on hikes, I exclusively eat a cheese roll. I don't believe there's any place for a sandwich other than a cheese sandwich on a hike. Like, nobody wants a delicious sandwich that's gone all soggy. Yeah. And then Katie Scheid, when she won UTMB 2022 now, she said her race was saved by a cheese sandwich. And I had so many people message me, like,
you saved her race.
Well, it wasn't me,
unfortunately. I think it's all down to you.
But I got some free Applewood chease earlier this year. So a potato sponsor isn't out of the question.
So guys, if you know any potato sponsors, then send them our way. Thank you very much for listening to this. We're about to roll into our main interview with Colin Jackson. But ahead of that, please don't forget the Runderwear competition. Follow the notes in the show notes, or head over to Runderwear's website and use the code PodShow. Right, over to Colin Jackson.
If you're looking for a bit of energy, then you're going to love this conversation between host Jamie and Colin Jackson.
Hello, it's Jamie from Runderwear here, and now we're with our main guest interview for this episode, Colin Jackson.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you here,
Thank
Colin.
you.
How are you enjoying the show?
Do you know what? I'm really enjoying myself, actually. Yeah, it's really fun. I think one of the things you got to get, if you're not really into the running community yet, is understand the passion of the people who are in the community.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
they absolutely love every single element of running. Absolutely. And that's great to see.
Absolutely. And they're going around in every single stand and loving it, and new things, new tech.
Asking questions, you know, where it can help them, how would it help them. Yeah. And one of the best things as well, I think, is that everybody's at different levels. Yeah. So there's not just a circumstance where everybody, this is just for the elite. It's not just for the elite. Or if it's just for the beginner. No, it's not just beginner, it's for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And so your own running, what are you doing these days?
Well, it's funny, somebody just asked me about that, and they said, do you have time to go out there and do a run? And I said, well, I have a 6K loop, but when I say I've got a 6K loop, which I can do 3 times a week quite comfortably, for timing really, basically, I do live on the coast, so it's flat.
Where are you?
Don't be taking me up hills, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing to do with that. Let me just stay on the coastline. So I'm in South Wales, just outside Cardiff. So and when I say I'm on the coast, I am on the coast.
Beautiful.
So it's flat.
And beautiful. Yeah,
I didn't want to put that in. I don't want many people coming to visit.
Yeah.
Friends know I live. I don't need them to come visit.
Absolutely. And so tell us a bit more about the Wings for Life World Run.
Yeah, well, the Wings for Life World Run I've been involved with from the very concept of of the run itself. So the World Run itself is set up to raise money for the foundation, the Wings for Life Foundation.
Yeah.
And the foundation raises money for spinal cord injury research.
Okay.
So as a run, we are really the biggest fundraising tool they have in that sense, where we kind of get across the globe, everybody can see what we're doing, what we're all about, and they can help donate to spinal cord injury research, which is great. So we're slightly unusual as a run, because it starts across the globe. So you have it on the app itself, or you can have some.
That's where you sign up on the app.
Yeah, you can sign up on the app, or you can sign up on the website. Either our website or the Red Bull website. You will find us there.
Brilliant.
And I say we're slightly unusual because you don't have a finish line.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
This is starting to get a little bit complicated, right?
Explain.
A race with no finish line. Yeah. Okay. So the finish line comes to you, and the finish line we've called the catch a car affectionately, and the catch a car starts 30 minutes after you as the runner. And when the catcher car catches you, it's the end of your race. So if you're really good and an ultra runner, for example, you could get 50, 60 kilometers in the bag. If you're like me, you may just get 6 kilometers in the bag.
When your
and if you're like my mum, you could get 200 meters in the bag. It doesn't really matter.
That's a good,
the distance itself is all yours. It belongs to you. So that's why we feel we're very much inclusive, and we don't want people to feel intimidated.
Brilliant.
And it happens
so it's a bit
every
of fun.
year. Yeah,
and it's a bit of fun.
And and you can, I think.
I like that.
People always want to have a good cause.
Yeah.
You want to do something sometimes and be able to give. So if you can be part of it, it's always great. And it's an event now. It happens May the 5th this year. So it kind of, and it's our 11th run. Brilliant. So it's kind of etched in people's mind about
in their diary.
May, Wings for Lifetime.
Yeah, brilliant. And the catch a car, does it pick up speed?
It picks up speed. So it starts at 15 kilometres an hour, and then it starts every 30 minutes to increase its speed.
Gets a little bit harder.
Gets a little bit quicker.
That's
where the fun kicks in. I think once it sets off, I think after the second half an hour, that's when we start to, I use the word hoover at people. We're backing up people quite quickly,
And where does it happen in the UK?
So there's a couple of organised app runs, for example, and they are in Nottingham, they're in Coventry, they're in London, Manchester. So those are where the organised app runs will take place. But then you can also, because it is a virtual run as well, you can do the same run as the people at the big events, the global big events, on your phone itself. So you literally can step outside your door and be part of the race.
Fabulous, brilliant. And so Colin Jackson's life right now, what's it looking like? You got this, what else is going on? What else?
Yeah, do you know what? My life isn't too bad.
Oh, I can imagine.
Most probably from the smile on my face.
I was going to say, you're not giving off that many negative vibes, so it's good. It must be good.
Especially it's an Olympic year as well, which makes it very exciting in that sense. So that's always a great thing. I'm back coaching again now, which makes it really exciting. Building towards the Olympic Games. Also, there's a luxury, a bit of pressure, because when your athletes are potentially going to be the Olympic team, and you want them not just to make the team, they've got the potential to make finals. It gets a little bit exciting.
That must be so nice though to give back, and for them to have someone with such experience like yourself just there as a kind of sounding board must be brilliant.
I'm not sure if they enjoy having me, but I enjoy
as long as they're not using tech by the sound of it. He never wants
any of that business. But no, it is. It's a great fun. It's great, and I love generally, giving back as much as I possibly can. I always feel that in my career, people always gave time for me. I mean, always. Whether it was my coach, my parents, my friends, they always looked after me. They helped me get to the top. My job now is to do the same. That little bit of repayment. So brilliant. I thoroughly enjoy that.
And getting to the top, I mean, for me, you were at the pinnacle. You were the leader in the world for a long time.
You want to say lucky. You can say
no. But you were, and the pressure, I want to know, how do you deal with that pressure? Because you were there, you were the person that everyone was trying to get to. How did you deal with that pressure?
Yeah, I think wearing a target is because I always say to people, be careful what you wish for, right? So when you're young and you have aspiration, you want to be the best in the world. Of course you do. But you actually don't know what the pressure's like to be the best in the world until it happens to you. And remember, there's only one. Right? So when it is actually you're wearing that target, you've got to wear it with pride. So I think you've got to change your mindset, first of all. And understand that you're the person that people are chasing. And also, you want to keep delivering what you're capable of delivering.
So putting it in a box, essentially, and
so
going, as long as I do me
as long
really
as I do the
well,
best me, the chances are the rest of the world will be trying to catch. So that's the way kind of mindset was. And that's
brilliant.
And
amazing.
Also, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it's only a small time in your life that happens.
Yeah.
And adding to that, you've got to think, how many people in the world can actually say they're the best in the world at what they do?
It's amazing.
Not many.
It's amazing. And then, so then the flip side to that that's interesting is when the new kid on the block does come and you say, oh, hang on a second.
Yeah.
He's good. He's really good. And he's a bit better than me. How do you then deal with that? Like when you know you've been there, you've been at the pinnacle, and you're on the way down.
Do you know? I always reminded myself. So when new ones were coming in who were fresh, and I was thinking, I can remember when I was 19 and 20, and I'd look at people who are 27, 28, and say, I want to retire them, right? I want to be the athlete who puts you to bed, right? That's the one. I want to be that person.
Not that you're competitive, obviously.
No, not at all. Never have been. And so, so I always feel that, okay, it's got to happen to me. So I'm quite a realist in that sense.
Philosophical about it.
It happens. It's got to happen.
Yeah.
And just embrace it. And also, I'd also look back in history in a very much of a positive light and say, do you know what? I've done what I've done. That's great.
Yeah.
You know what? No one can ever challenge you for that because it's there. It's etched in stone.
Yeah.
So once it's time for you to move on, just move on gracefully and find your other niche.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. That's good.
Let's head over to some kit chat now with the co-founders of Runr, the clothing brand, who are also getting involved in some awesome new initiatives.
Hello, I'm Jamie, I'm the founder of Runderwear, and today we're with the guys from Runr, and we're going to be talking a little bit about their brand and a little bit of background. So nice to have you in, chaps. What's your names, and give us a bit of background to the brand.
My name's Matt, co-founder of Runr. I've been running for about over a decade now, doing various marathons and ultra marathons. That's me.
And I'm Craig, I'm one of the co-founders here at Runr. Been running since teenage years, everything from parkrun, 5K, up to marathons and ultra marathons.
Fantastic. And when did Runr first start? And what was the moment? What was the genius moment?
I was sat on a train between London and Manchester. I remember it quite well, on a busy commuter train. I was daydreaming out the window, as you do when you sit on trains for a long old time. And I remember thinking, in this busy commuter train, there must be lots of people who are training from an event. I was training for a marathon at the time. Wouldn't it be great to be able to, just identify someone else who shares that same passion for running that I've got? And I was on my phone talking and like tweeting to various people that were connecting with people in the virtual world about running. I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could just identify? And there might be someone sat opposite me or next to me, and you can strike up that conversation. Because I think you find that there's a lot of people who are passionate about the same things you wouldn't necessarily know. And when you sort of find the people that are passionate about the same thing, then I think it's sort of really sort of there's a spark and a connection between people. So that's where it started. And I've said to Craig, wouldn't it be great if we could create an identity for runners that during the running, which we've got a lot of products that are now when you go for a run, but it's actually the sort of the outside of it. If you go to the pub or you go to the shops, and everyday life, how do you know that someone you might be sat next to shares the same passion, really? So that was the moment that was like, actually there could be something there, and that's kind of where it started.
Fantastic, with a bit of style, love it. Yeah, and so the hats are going well. They look great. Talk us through the little range and what you've got there.
Yeah, so when we first started Runr, we focused on the clothing, so the hoodies and the t-shirts. As Matt said, after a run, you go home, shower, change, put your runner kit on. And then as we've expanded, we've gone into, especially this time of year where it's 2 degrees, 1 degree outside, winter headwear just is flies off the shelf for us. It's one of our most popular range of products. And then also over the years, we have people talking to us saying, look, we love your hoodies and t-shirts, we love the Runr brand, we would love to actually run in your kit. So that's when we thought, well, running accessories is something that really appealed to myself and Matt. So we thought, well, how can we go down the route of headwear through running hats and running visors? So our biggest selling range of products is now our running headwear. Yeah, hats and visors. So
I think with all the products that we make, we go with big bold colours and big logos on the tops and on the hats and stuff. And I think that really encapsulates people's passion for running. And I think people are quite proud of what they've done and their achievements, even if it's just putting your trainers on and going outside. That's quite an achievement. For a lot of people, including myself, for a lot of the time. But also when you get to that runner's high at the end of a race or an end of a training run, and there's a lot of emotion and passion. I think that's kind of what we're trying to build into the big brands and big colours.
Have you had any nice stories? I imagine you get some stories in to the office via email about people that have connected via the brand, like having that exact thing. They've been on a train or something. They've seen each other in the same, and then struck up a friendship or anything. Have you had anything like that?
There's the moment where we kind of thought, actually, there is something here. Craig and I were sat down in one of our local pubs, very beautiful pubs outside on a summer's evening, having a pint, just discussing in the earlier days of running. I think we were both wearing our original sort of runner t-shirts on, and some guy opposite us, just said, "Well, what's Runr? Is that running related?" And so we just explained the story that we just explained. We're only very, very early days in terms of the products. And it turns out he was running 12 marathons in 12 months, raising money for, I forget the charity.
It was a local hospice.
Local hospice. Raised a lot of money, and that was his goal. And that's what he was doing for that year. And we ended up chatting for a number of hours. Actually, really inspirational and really passionate guy about running.
Lifetime customer.
Yeah, well, he does. Yeah, he has bought it. But it was that moment. He wouldn't have talked to us because generally that doesn't always happen, and we wouldn't have noticed or necessarily talked to him. But actually, it turns out, just sat opposite us, he was doing the exact same sort of thing that's really passionate from our perspective. So that was a really nice little moment that we were like, actually, that's kind of what we wanted to find. Other people that share that passion.
Brilliant.
So.
And I think you're now taking that on to some other, how can we say it, charitable endeavours this year.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through that?
So I think when it comes to the world of running, there's in the wider world there's lots of bad news stories. So in the world of running, there's so much good stuff that goes on, so much positivity.
Yeah, I agree.
There's so much encouragement and motivation out there that we were like, how can we tap into those things and really highlight how good the running community is? So we joined forces with a local running club, Fareham Running Club, based down on the south coast where we are. Probably 18 months ago, to ultimately encourage runners to run to their local food bank. The number of food banks in the UK is on the rise, the number of people using the food banks is on the increase. So we were like, how runners are always looking for a reason to run. Clubs have always got training runs throughout the week, so how can we encourage a club to use one of their training runs to run to a food bank? So we literally just said to the running community through social media, to our customers and our followers, and said, look, our challenge to you, our ask to you is, will you run to your local food bank? I think there's about something like 2,500 to 3,000 of them in the UK, and chances are there's one within a couple of miles of where we all live. And last autumn, winter, we had over 500 clubs and groups that got involved and ran to their local food bank, donating somewhere in excess of 80,000 kilos of food. We've gone again this year. Big shout out to Sarah at Fareham Running Club, who's been the main driver behind this, and she's coming to the run show this weekend. She's been contacting running clubs and groups up and down the country, trying to get them involved because she knows the good work that the food banks do to support families and individuals. I think the latest numbers are about 300 this year have got involved, but we don't want to know every club that's doing it. We just know it's happening out there. We know how fantastic the running community is to support initiatives like this.
Fantastic. That's great.
And the second one we're just launching is Medals for Kids, which is launching here at the Run Show this year.
Okay.
Which we're quite excited about.
Talk us through that.
So I personally, myself and Matt, we've both got young kids. All of our kids are very active because they probably see us out and about running. Not every kid has that opportunity. So we kind of thought, well, what can we do in the world of running to kind of inspire and encourage kids to get out and be active? As runners, a lot of us have medals at home. The ones that mean a lot maybe hang on the wall or take pride of place on the mantelpiece. The rest of them tend to sit in a box under your bed at the back of a drawer. Well, what if we could take those medals and give them to schools, to groups, to organisations who could distribute them to kids as encouragement for getting out and being active?
It's motivational, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I ran this past my 6-year-old and he loved it and he wanted a medal there and then. And I'm like, no, I just want to see if you like the idea.
Yeah.
So we kind of tested the water a few weeks ago and just we had quite a lot of medals sitting around, and we could have probably had 7 times as many medals with just the people that came back on that one social media post.
Fantastic. And so what's the mechanism for collecting medals after the show? Is there a mechanism in place?
Yeah, so the launch at the show is for people to bring their medals here. Off the back of the show, what we're going to do is on our Medals for Kids page on our website is we've got an address, basically it's our HQ, where people can just post their unwanted medals or the medals they want to donate to the cause. It's quite a new initiative that we've just created. We don't know how it's going to go. It could be a lead balloon, it could be fantastic. I hope it's fantastic.
Well, you've got to try these things, right?
Exactly.
You never know.
It's going to cause us a lot of work if it does, but
In a positive sense, yeah.
In a positive sense, but I mean, there's event organisers who have thousands of medals that from old events that are not going to be used.
Absolutely.
So what do you do with them?
Yeah.
You could put them in landfill. Don't really want that to happen.
Yeah.
We've been inspired by Jog On and the recycling of running shoes. Well, how can we do a similar thing with running medals, but that inspires kids to get out and be active?
Brilliant. I love it. I love it. Well, thanks so much to you guys at Runr, and that's the end of this week's kit review.
A slightly different way of talking about tech this week, so I'm going to hand over to myself to talk through Shokz headphones. We are taking a slightly different approach in this week's tech segment, but nonetheless, the technology that we're going to be looking at today is a widespread favourite of the running community, and this week we focus on headphones and particularly Shokz, formerly known as Aftershokz. And in a market with ordinary headphones completely flooded, Shokz stands out with their revolutionary technology and unparalleled performance. And at the heart of Shokz brilliance lies its groundbreaking bone conduction technology. But what exactly is bone conduction? I've only heard of headphones that go in your ears or over your ears. Well, instead of traditional headphones that rely on covering or inserting into your ears, Shokz headphones utilise bone conduction to deliver sound directly through to your cheekbones. And I know that sounds quite weird, but stick with me because I imagine your first thought is, hold on, how can I hear good quality audio when the buds aren't even in my ears? Well, by bypassing your eardrums and sending vibrations through your cheekbones, Shokz headphones leave your ears open to the world around you. And whether you're out for a run, cycling through the city, or just enjoying your favourite music, podcast, or pod show, you can stay aware of surroundings, enhancing both safety and situational awareness. Alongside the bone conduction technology, they also have direct pitch technology. Now, I'm going to get quite technical here, but this is a really revolutionary cutting-edge technology, and it revolutionises sound transmission by precisely directing sound waves and creating an optimised sound field with varying pressure distribution. By harnessing the principle of sound wave superposition, direct pitch TM technology ensures an enhanced audio experience with precise directionality and immersive sound quality. Let's talk a bit about durability. Shokz headphones are engineered to withstand even the most rigorous of activities, whether you're sweating out in the gym or caught in a sudden downpour. These headphones are built to keep up with your active lifestyle, ensuring uninterrupted performance every step of the way. So that's all of the technology and the durability, but what do the reviews say? Well, the popular open run version of the Shokz headphones have a 4.5 star rating on Argos with over 9,000 reviews. Now, I can talk from a personal point of view. I've been using them for just over 2 years and wear them pretty much every day for running, using the gym, and just everyday commuting. And I was someone who was searching for the right headphones and switching between multiple wired and wireless and brands and styles and all that type of thing. And they either got lost, which I guess is my fault, didn't charge well, broke, fell out when I ran, or just couldn't deal with my slightly above average sweaty nature. But since switching to Shokz headphones, I haven't looked back. Obviously, it's not a one size fits all, but if you're on the lookout for a new pair of headphones, then I would definitely give them a go. The tech is cool, the brand is friendly, and they're fairly reasonably priced actually. So check out Shokz at the end of this pod show, but that brings us to the end of this week's tech section.
So Paris coming up, Olympics this year. Talk me through what that is for you and what you're excited about.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what, in terms of the whole month, what does that look like from behind the scenes?
Oh, yeah.
I'm quite interested in the dynamics of how it works as well.
Yeah, and I'm wearing a couple of hats this time.
Right,
so
okay,
usually I'm just straightforward media, right?
Okay,
so this time I'll be coming in on the coaching side as well. And they're very different in the way you approach. So, you know, you can't be so very selfish as a coach. That's the first thing you got to do. You got to realise that it's about the athlete, not about you. Yeah. So I will spend time certainly. So I coach Andrew Pozzi, who's world indoor champion for hurdles, European indoor champion. It's one of the best in the world, right? So let's put that into the mix. So there's a lot of pressure for him to deliver a performance. The expectations coming back from injury. He spent a year out, so he's coming back from injury. So as a coach, you've got to kind of manage expectation with reality in that sense as well. And when things are going well, you keep pushing that. You keep pushing it all the time. So the build up to the Olympic Games, certainly the month for us, will be about solid, focused preparation. What do you need? What's necessary for you to give me the best of you? virtually the most difficult thing
Yeah.
is trying to get the athlete not to think about other people and
Yeah.
just to concentrate on their potential, on
Yeah.
what they can do,
Yeah.
and understand and appreciate
That box
you
again.
have your
Yeah.
line. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. That's where
Yeah.
you need to be, and that's where
Yeah.
you need to stay.
Yeah.
Then you go on the flip side of that, because then you're doing your preparation on the media side of stuff, and you get to know the team, and you want to be able to tell the story of team members of Team GB
Yeah.
in a way that is positive and honest to both them and to your audience.
Yes.
So you don't want to be taking
Yeah.
secrets that you know when
No.
you hear, because as you know,
Yeah.
as a commentator,
Yeah.
that's not my business.
Yeah.
You know, if
Yeah.
someone wants to tell me about on screen about
Yeah.
what their injuries are, that's what their circumstance
Yes.
is. So I always
Yeah.
feel, as my role as the commentator, is to really say what I see and explain it to the everyday person.
Yeah.
My nan has got to understand what I'm talking about
100%.
and what this athlete is achieving,
Yeah,
what what they're trying to do. So preparation on both sides are quite
Yeah.
difficult. They're selfish in one place,
Yeah.
because for my athlete, I have to look after him.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the media side, I've
Yeah.
got to have a holistic opinion on
Yeah.
all the world's best athletes.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
put
yeah.
mine in the mix. So
Yeah.
you just take it
Yeah,
out. it's like
impartial.
in it.
Yeah.
You go that.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
But we
that's
see the
it.
backgrounds after where
Exactly.
you're all in the
exactly,
studio
exactly.
when your
Cheering,
athlete's
'cause
doing it.
Ultimately,
Yeah, that's great.
That's what we
Yeah,
want. We're
of course.
fans of the sport, just as
Of
much
course.
as everybody
and
else.
a bit competitive, right? And a bit competitive, yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. I love that. I love those little outtakes. They're brilliant. When you're watching it back and, Michael Johnson's up there jumping around and loving it.
I always feel that we're really blessed to
Yeah.
be in the position that we're in, and
Yeah.
I think all the team feel that.
Yeah.
We all know each other from our sport
Yeah.
itself, which
Yeah.
I think is great,
Yeah.
because the camaraderie is already there.
It's natural. It's natural.
We
you
don't
see
have to,
it.
you don't have to worry about particular things. If someone's going to be a little
Yeah.
bit precious,
Yeah.
who cares if somebody's
Yeah, yeah.
precious? They just get
Yeah.
buried, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
because
yeah.
they know that's the way we operate as
It's
we
good.
are.
It's
So
good.
because we've known each other for such a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's, I think, is one of the loveliest things
Yeah.
about being able, and the most pleasurable things about watching young athletes perform at their very best.
Amazing.
And we're the ones that are trying
Yeah.
to give it, to breathe some light into it.
Brilliant. And then coming back then, so just taking a step back to the coaching part of that, and saying that it's really difficult to keep them just focused on themselves. Now, in your day, you didn't have social media to deal with. You're now coaching in that world, which is difficult, because how do you deal with that as a coach, and how do you advise athletes on that? Because it's very difficult to keep a lid on it if that's part of it. It's part of the
do you know
part of the
what?
game.
I'm going to say I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
That my athletes that I work with, they're not that fussed about social media.
Right, okay.
So I'm lucky that they have that opportunity just to really focus.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
contractually, with lots
Yeah.
of things that
Yeah,
they're
that's it.
involved with,
Yeah.
they have to do some sense
Yeah,
of social media.
Yeah.
And they do it. They,
Yeah.
they tick the box, they oblige, they do, and they do it well.
Yeah.
Which is always
Yeah,
the key.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be too intrusive, because
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about your performance. You
Yeah.
can have great social media,
Yeah.
but if you start losing, then people start losing interest in you.
Yeah.
So it's to create that right balance of,
Yeah.
giving what you want, giving
Yeah.
what the people want,
Yeah.
but also knowing what your bread and butter actually is.
Yeah.
And performance is your job. That's the industry you're in.
Yeah.
And as long as they understand that, and me as a coach keep reiterating that
Yeah.
point to them, they kind of get my drift.
Leads on to my next question. So I'm really intrigued in that moment before history's made.
Yeah.
Right. So you're on that lead up. You're doing the warm up. Talk me through the mental preparation, because I know what I'm like, and I'm an amateur marathon runner, right? And I'm like, right, I'm getting myself. I have my little routine. But the Olympic Games, and you've got one go to get it right. And in hurdles, high hurdles as well, there's no margin for error at all.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, for me, how do you deal with that?
Well, I just described the Olympic Games to somebody just now.
Yeah.
As a glorified school sports day. That's how you got to think about it,
God.
right? It's nothing any different,
Yeah.
right? And the reason why I say that is that your emotions You can't crank up your emotions any more than they are. So if you can remember what it's like when you're absolutely petrified, going on the start line in school or sports day, when the pressure's on, you know, your win will win your house the whole competition.
Yeah.
And you know that, how important that is. And if you can deal with that, you can deal with the Olympic Games exactly the same way. There's no real difference in that sense.
Okay.
The only kind of difference, I guess, is a couple of thousand people in the stand, there's lights all over the place, there's cameras there, and there's media talking about it.
And 100 million people watching on
just
TV.
Just ignore them, right? Let's just focus on you, again. So preparation, again, you start to get yourself into, you know, you've heard the saying, in the zone.
Yeah.
Right, when you get yourself in the zone, that's when you can be hyper-focused and concentrated on the job in hand. And you're drawing on all the resources and all the memories that you've had in preparation. So, you know, what you've done well in training, what the opponents have been like in previous races, but also understanding that now when you're at the championship, it's about this race. What's happened in races prior count for nothing. And it's exactly the same for qualifying rounds. They count for nothing. When you're in the final, that's when the focus is on. So you've been all those emotions, and that says, key is trusting your preparation.
Yes.
You've prepared well. And then when you put yourself into that starting block, is to remember, I've done this thousands of times. Nothing has changed. Nobody's extended the hurdle distance. Nobody's cranked up the hurdle height. I've done this time after time after time. So you just get yourself into that that situation. And then once you settled into the blocks, which is most probably the worst bit, when you're going into the blocks, and the starter says set, and your heart is absolutely thumping, the gun releases everything. And then off you go.
Boom.
Automatic pilot. You don't even hear people in the crowd. You don't hear. You hear people hitting hurdles left, right, and centre, and you're just trying to keep your focus on that, keeping tall. All the things your coaches told you, just in case things are happening. You've got to think on your feet. You've got 1 second in between each barrier, and in that 1 second, you have 15,000 thoughts of how to adjust your body as the hurdles are coming a little bit closer. Who's next to you? Someone's touched your arm. You don't want to be too aggressive when you throw your arm back now, because that can throw your timing off. Pull your trail leg through. Get your lead leg down. Sprint, sprint, sprint. Take off. All these things are going on in your mind in 1 second.
But you were a machine. Like, I remember as a young lad watching you, and you just go dum 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 dum, and then the release when you went over the line, and that euphoria of just, it was brilliant, and that big, and the Colin Jackson smile. So there you go. We all love that.
It was, but you know what? That's just after hours and hours of practicing the same thing. And it's not just my hours. It's my training partner's hours. It's my coach's hours. They put just as much time as I did into trying to perfect my skill.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much for today.
It's been a real pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much. And that's the end of our main guest interview for this episode.
Listening to this next section is going to make me feel really jealous because I want to run New York Marathon, but for now I've got to hear about it with Sports Tours International.
Hey guys, for this race review section I have Ben here from Sports Tours to talk about the New York Marathon. Now Ben, talk to me about how Sports Tours work with New York Marathon first of all.
Great, so Sports Tours International, we've been going for 50 years now, and we were first...
You don't look that old.
we're not personally, but it's been a long weekend, so nobody. So we've been going for 50 years now, and we're the first running tour operator. So our founder, Vince Regan, an Irish international marathon runner, first started sending friends of his to the New York Marathon in 1973.
Oh, wow.
And that's how the whole concept of sports travel or running travel began. So the New York Marathon is one of our most important events, and now subsequently we've gone on to work with all of the 6 world major marathons and various other city marathons, big city marathons around North America and Europe. So New York Marathon is where it all began, and as a result, it's a huge part of our identity as a business and what we offer. And each year we send 1,200 runners from the UK, France and Ireland out to New York to take part in this iconic world major marathon.
So if we want to run New York, we can sign up with sports tours, and actually you don't just give them a race place, you do other things as well, right? But we're here to talk about the race today. So if you're interested in running New York, talk to the guys at sports tours. They'll get you a package and they'll get you out there, and it's super fun and loads of other things. But you've run New York. I've actually run New York as well. But tell me about the race. How would you describe it as a marathon? Is it an easy one, a hard one? It's very quiet, isn't it? The crowd are very reserved.
Yeah, as you would expect in New York, it's like anything else multiplied by 10. The atmosphere is absolutely off the scale. The whole way through New York, I think it's unique to the world major marathon running scene in as much as the race is, first of all, point to point.
Yep.
So you have to get a bus out to the start at 4 in the morning. And 5 in the morning, between 5 and 6 in the morning.
I got a ferry
You
across
can get the ferry as well.
Yeah.
You can get the ferry as well, so you have to go to Staten Island.
Yep.
And then you have to run back to Manhattan. You run through the 5 boroughs of New York. And each borough takes it upon itself to try and outdo the other in terms of support.
They really do
along the
as
route.
well. Yeah.
Totally. So you start in Staten Island and you run across into Brooklyn, and the whole way through Brooklyn, it's like one giant block party.
Yep.
And you think, my God, if it's like this the whole way round, then...
Well, I thought there's no way it can be like this the whole way around, because I've done a lot of like city marathons, but like it's so noisy. It's loud. But yeah, it's a great start to the race, right?
It certainly is, and I'm sure you found it. But you kind of think, well, okay, I've got to just keep it under control here, because I can get carried away and swept along, and then get halfway, and that's it.
You followed my race, yeah.
So anyway, you get through Brooklyn. You then run across into Queens. Through halfway, that's obviously when the race really begins in earnest. And at around about 16 miles, you run across from Queens into Manhattan across the Queensboro Bridge, which, as mad as it might seem, a bridge can be a proper climb.
It's the only, to be honest, that's the only quiet bit as well, the bridges, because that's where you don't get the crowds along the side. But actually, the bridges are really tough. It's weird that the bridges are tough, but you're right, they're pretty much the biggest hill, apart from that bit at the end. Yeah.
And it's the quiet, it's the steepness of it, it's the sort of psychological part of a race where, whether it's the wall or whatever you want to call it, but the going starts to get tough. And you come through the Queensboro Bridge into Manhattan, and you're faced with what's called the wall of noise for obvious reasons. And then that takes you into Manhattan. Sports Tours has a cheer zone just as you round the corner onto, is it 3rd Avenue? I can't remember. First Avenue, I think. You run up First Avenue and then come back down. You run up to Harlem and then back down.
So do you only cheer people that have gone with Sports Tours? You just boo everybody else?
I mean, we try and discriminate and give the full support to our runners. But no, look, it's an absolutely extraordinary event in terms of support. And then you get into Manhattan, the wall of noise, that sort of carries you all the way up through Manhattan into Harlem, and then you run back down 5th Avenue. You can see the Empire State Building in the distance. It never seems to get any bigger, and it goes on and on and on. And then you make it to Central Park, which again isn't flat, and these small little inclines in Central Park feel like mountains as you get to the finish, and then you cross the most iconic finish line in all of running, and it is just an absolute wild ride, but an astonishing event. And we talk a lot about bucket list events, but I just don't think New York can be beaten.
Yeah, and I do think it's an incredible. I totally share that. I think it's a great race. It really is iconic. One you should all check out. I think don't be too intimidated by the climbs and the hills. We've talked about some of the harder bits, but it is actually, I think, quite an accessible marathon actually out of all of them. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if people come to us and say, "Well, which marathon's the fastest? Which one's the best?" Look, if you're going to run the fastest possible time, then do Berlin or do Chicago. New York has these, in the grand scheme of things, really minor inclines, and your time might be a minute and a half slower or 2 minutes, but God, I would say probably the support is worth that and some. And it is a super accessible event. The city opens its hearts to running for a weekend, and you get to experience the greatest city on earth in a whole different way. So, you know, the concept of actually seeing the world through running, it doesn't get better than the New York Marathon, that's for sure.
And you're right, the city, because I had so many people afterwards when I was wearing my medal, as I was walking back to my hotel, like stopping me in the street and saying, well done. I've not really had that before, but actually there was a level of enthusiasm that's beyond really anything I've ever experienced at any other race.
Yeah, I think so, and it's not the oldest of the big city marathons. I think Boston is the oldest, but New York is probably second on that list in terms of a marathon of that scale, which just dominates and takes over the city. So yeah, incredible. You really feel part of a community and something bigger than yourself. And you know, there isn't a single person I've met who's run New York and not absolutely raved about it.
Yeah, it's a great one. Ben, thank you so much. This has been great. I think if you are interested in running the New York Marathon, then you could get in touch with Sports Tours, and if you don't, they'll boo you when they see you at their cheer zone. So thanks everyone for joining this one, and on to the next bit.
Tom's done a bit of jumping around. He's gone from advice last week to nutrition this week, but equally good information with Jamie and Tom.
Hi Tom, how you
Hi,
doing?
Jamie. Yeah,
you
good,
all right?
thanks. Yeah.
Great
Yourself?
very good. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, not too bad. I really enjoyed the first section we did in the last episode on nutrition. Today I want to talk a bit more about the race day itself. Mm-hmm. So race day nutrition, the morning. We touched on the breakfast, I think, in the last episode, but fueling in terms of gels, they agree with some people, they don't agree with some people. I would like to also know, thankfully they do for me, so gels work for me. But for people that don't as well, I think I'd like to cover that off as well, because if people don't like it, I don't know, sometimes I don't know what to say to them. Mm-hmm. What's the general consensus on morning to begin with? Morning breakfast, what's the advice there?
The morning breakfast is important, but its level of importance depends kind of on how well the carb load has gone for the last couple of days. Okay. If you've done a good carb load, mm-hmm. then that morning breakfast really is just a top up of your glycogen. Mm-hmm. And it's really your liver glycogen that you're topping up there, which will have been depleted on the night before. Okay. Without wanting to get overly technical, that's what you're doing in that morning breakfast, really. Mm. And again, similar to the carb load, similar principles in terms of you'd want a low fat, low fibre, easily digestible carb source. Mm. A lot of people, for example, like peanut butter on toast or on crumpets or whatever. Yeah. There's actually I generally tried to steer people away from it because although it's delicious, it's very nutritious, it's not the time for it because it's high fat. Potentially slows down your digestion a little bit. You don't need it. So just an example of a common food that people would often have, I tend to steer people away. So something like jam or honey would be a better option at breakfast time. And there's specific rules or guidance about how long you've got before the race starts that you should be having that breakfast. And depending on that duration that you've got dictates how many carbs you should be having. Right. Because what you don't want to do is throw it all away in the last couple of hours and feel heavy with undigested breakfast at the start line. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we want to go into real specifics of numbers right now, but No,
not too much. I mean, I think I feel good at about 3 hours before, right? I mean, I don't know how that sits with the science and, in your...
So it's... Basically, you should be aiming for absolute bare minimum 1 hour. Ideally 2 to 3. Yeah. But it will be dictated to you to some extent by the event. You know, some marathons, for example, the Spanish ones start at 8 a.m. So if you're not used to getting up early, I mean, I am used to getting up early. I know you are as well. So it wouldn't be a major deal for me. But if you're the sort of person that normally gets up at 8 or 9 o'clock, and then all of a sudden you're trying to get up at 4 a.m. for breakfast, that's not going to work. Yeah. You're not going to tolerate that well. So.
I remember having Cape Town, and I think the start was 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And it was before it got too hot. I got up at 3, had breakfast, and then went back to sleep.
That is another option. It's not the worst idea in the world. Yeah,
it did actually work.
I've heard people doing that.
Yeah.
So that is another option. But if you kind of think of that breakfast just as your top up and not stress too much about stuffing the system there, then you can kind of do what you want in terms of the logistics, what you would have done anyway, and then let that dictate what you're going to have for it. So let's say you've got a couple of hours, 2 hours before race starts, you would be aiming for around about 2 grams of carbs per kilogram in between that breakfast and you starting the race. So if you're a 70 kilogram person, that means in those 2 hours, you're going to be aiming for around about 140 grams of carbs. There's a million ways to meet that target, and it will again depend on the sort of foods that you like. But really, the emphasis should be on easy digestible carbs.
Any little things that you do?
Yep.
What's your little bits that you do on race morning?
Crumpets have been a go-to for me for a long time. I just find them really, really easy to digest.
Right, yeah, interesting.
They have the advantage of you can use only a tiny amount of spread on top and it dissolves easily, so you're not using much fat.
Yeah.
And I have also gotten into the habit more recently of starting to use some of the pre-made sports drink mixes.
Okay.
And even more recently, making my own.
Right.
So out of the constituent elements of different sugars and things, which again I could go off on. I could talk for hours about this stuff. But we will. In the last hour before a half marathon or a marathon, I tend to be sipping on that. So that's going to be roughly 80 grams of carbs. Okay. So if you think of it, let's say you're aiming for 150, that's half.
Yeah.
And you're having that and just sipping it in the last hour because A, you're hydrating yourself. B, you're never going to feel too full.
Yeah.
And you know you're going to be like completely well stocked from a carbohydrate perspective at the start line.
I've done a few tests which I find there's nothing worse than getting to start line and needing a pee.
Yeah.
Right. And that is terrible. And I've timed how long my system takes for water to come through, so I know when to stop, and I have an actual stop.
That's good.
And I've done a few tests where I'm like, right, that's my system. Right, it's cut off now. Right, and it's literally, it could be to take away the fact that I'm feeling dry mouth. I'm taking water, but I spit it out. So it keeps me feeling like I don't need it, if that makes sense.
That's good.
So that's one thing I've been doing.
But can you cater for the impact of nerves on race day, which is going to affect that sort of thing? You know, everything's different on race morning.
This is why we need to talk.
And that includes things like your GI tolerance. So although I've said replicate things as well as you can in training, you can never quite replicate your feeling on race day. Adrenaline surging, full of nerves, surrounded by other people who are nervous. So you try your best, but you'll never quite replicate it. And
good point.
Most people have got at least one race experience of GI discomfort where it's gone wrong.
Yeah, very much so. And gels during the race.
Gels during the race, really important. So when
overview, just a sort of an overview as to somebody's coming in, quite basics. Where do they test it? How do they do the testing as well? Sorry to interrupt.
No, all good. So when I first started marathon running, I thought, I don't need any of that fancy stuff. For the first one.
Yeah.
For the second one, I bought some kind of sugar tablets because I thought, that'll do. And I bought them the day before in Rotterdam. I was like, these look fine. And then I realised, well, if I'm going to take this a bit more seriously, maybe let's not be dismissive of these products. Maybe they are actually useful.
Yeah.
Sure enough, they are incredibly useful because they're mostly very well... the composition is perfect for your absorption.
Fine.
For a lot of them.
Yeah.
That said, they vary quite significantly in terms of the size, the amount of carbs that are in them, the type of carbs that are in them, which is important, the taste, the texture. But what they are essentially is a concentrated sugar source.
Yeah.
So if we understand that carbohydrate depletion, glycogen depletion, is the main reason of poor performance in a marathon, hitting the wall, you can prevent that by pre-fueling and good fueling strategy on the way round. There are numbers that you can aim for in terms of number of grams of carbohydrate per hour, and you can try and push that limit. That limit used to be around about 60, maximum 70 grams of carbs per hour whilst running, regardless of body size, which means it actually benefits smaller runners because they're getting a greater percentage of their needs.
Brilliant. Knew there'd be an advantage there somewhere for being
it's paid
5'5".
eventually. But actually, there's been a kind of, as with everything in running, real leaps forward in terms of the technology in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
And people are saying, you know, these world records that are being broken, is it the shoes? Is it other tech, or is it the nutrition? There's a lot of people who think the nutrition has much more of a say in it than it's given credit for.
Interesting.
So there are, and I agree,
right.
and I would agree for my own performance as well. So basically, they will use blends of sugars.
Yeah.
So particularly, you'll get either glucose or maltodextrin. That's transported one way into the system, and then fructose is another sugar which is transported separately. Those, if you get that ratio correct, it means you can absorb a much higher number of carbs per hour, pushing it up towards 90, 100 grams per hour.
Wow,
So if you look at the likes of Kipchoge, he's 100 plus, and a lot of their elites are now. And I am now hitting 100 grams per hour, but you have to practice it and know which products work for you.
Yeah, because I was going to say that on the which products work for you. I was talking with our show producer Dominic and talking about his experience as well. And we were talking about the actual texture of each gel. It's very different. Some are a bit more watery, so that works for them. Some are a bit more glutinous, which I can deal with, thankfully, and I quite like a more glutinous gel.
Yeah.
Anything on that? Is there any difference in it, or how would you advise on that?
Some people are really sensitive to these things.
Yeah.
I'm like you. Luckily, I've got a pretty robust constitution, and I appear to be pretty good at dealing with most gels.
Yeah.
That said, when we're talking about those number thresholds of what you can tolerate, the point is that when you exceed that, your the sugars are not being absorbed into your bloodstream quickly enough, which means they stay in your gut, which means the gut gets potentially flooded with water, and that's what's called osmotic diarrhea. Basically. Runners trots.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the threshold.
Yeah.
I've never reached that, luckily, but that if you push it, that's what will happen.
Fine.
Or one of the things that would happen.
Yeah.
Some people are very sensitive to that at much lower numbers.
Yeah.
And some people hate the sickliness of some gels.
Yeah.
I don't mind them, to be honest. There are some that are much more neutral tasting.
Yeah.
There are some that are much thicker.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to mention specific brand names. Probably not.
No, not today.
Maybe not today.
I think the fact that I've seen an uptick in neutral gels as well. That's obviously that's a trend which I've seen, and it's quite interesting because people can't deal with that sort of sickly and also having more sort of salted caramels and different sort of salty. Non-sugary feel of gels, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients recently who just cannot fathom having something that sweet for 3 hours plus. And there are other options. So you kind of said, what else would you do if you well, I personally think if you try enough gels, and honestly, the market is so busy now. There are so many companies. There probably is going to be a gel that works for you if you look hard enough.
I agree.
But if not, another option would be to drink your carbs. So I kind of mentioned the pre-race drink that I often have. Basically the same stuff that you would have on the way round. And you can either make your own if you want to get really techie, or you can buy products that are made. It does mean that you're carrying liquid, which is a bit annoying.
Can you make something that is then put into the water bottles that are en route, or water en route?
That I think would be tricky because they often don't mix instantly. So I think it would be a real faff. So probably not.
Brilliant. Well, I think, as a kind of real overview, because we could sit here for hours and talk about this stuff. I certainly could and get quite nerdy about it. But and looking forward to it. I've got a pretty mega trip coming up right in the middle of my marathon block coming up, so I'd love to have a bit more of a chat about it and how you might be able to help me, because I'm going to be having lots of different foods from different parts of the world, and I probably need a bit of advice. So I'd love to have a bit of time off camera as well chatting about that. That'd be great.
Definitely.
That'd be awesome.
Let's do it.
Brilliant.
Let's get stuck into some advice now with Arj, because I want to know what performance coach is. How can it help me? How would it help me? How should it help me? Let's find out.
Hi everyone, for this episode of the Pod Show, we have an advice section with Arj from Performance Physique. Arj is a performance coach, so I'm going to ask him, A, what is a performance coach and how does that work and how can it help people like us improve our running? Hey Arj, how are you?
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Well, so I'm going to start with that. So you're a performance coach. What is that? What does that mean?
It basically means taking any matter of performance, whether that's nutrition, whether that's mindset, whether that's physiology, and saying, right, what are you doing at A and how can we get you to B faster and more efficiently? So basically improve your performance no matter what the facet of performance it is.
Okay, so that's pretty awesome. So in terms of the levels of qualifications that you guys have, I'm assuming that this isn't something you just guess at, right?
No. And that's a really good question because I think there is a lot of that happening within the industry. No, I've been coaching within novices right through to Team GB Olympians for 18 years.
Amazing.
I've written 2 sports science degrees. I've got a lot of qualifications, and to be honest, it's not the qualifications. It's about marrying the experience with those qualifications and then just taking a step back and thinking about the person as well. We often think it's just about the numbers, but the athlete actually at the centre of the approach is most important.
But I think that does really help. I think it gives some sort of confidence that what you're providing is de facto nice and good and positive, as opposed to, you know, there's lots of people claiming to be coaches and run coaches in particular, and that's quite difficult if they're not qualified.
It's really scary, actually. I think I've spoken about this publicly in the past, that I think it's great about getting more and more people involved in the sport, and I think it's really important that we do that, especially with running, which is so accessible.
Yep.
But, you know, I was taught about scope of practice and first do no harm.
What's scope of practice?
So basically, I'm not a physiotherapist, so I'm not going to put my hands on you and pretend I can understand what's going on inside your muscle.
I mean, give it some time. We might have a beer.
Yeah, if you buy me dinner. And therefore, the same applies as a coach. You know, you shouldn't be saying, I've run a 5K. It worked great for me. Let me tell you how to do the 5K, which is what we see a lot of.
And I think that's the danger of, like, my mate said. And Yeah, so actually the recommendation, certainly from us at the Pod Show, is that you should go and seek advice from proven and trusted and recommended experts like yourself. So, okay, so somebody like me, so let's say I'm a middling ultra runner and I want to improve, I want to get a faster time. How would you work with me to develop a plan?
Okay, so I know we were joking about this earlier. I would immediately correct you on your middling term. So that always happens from so what we call it as motivational interviewing.
Yep.
We would understand that there's a certain trait that keeps coming up. Maybe you talk negatively about yourself first so no one else does about you.
I'm going to be honest, I talk very positively about myself. I'm just trying to be humble for the cameras.
However, I'm the same, that's okay. So then I would say, okay, we'll go through a series of questions, and it might be about identifying how much strength work are you doing in the week.
Mm-hmm. So I do 2 to 3 sessions.
Fantastic, excellent. How many miles are you doing each week?
About 30.
Okay. And how are you spreading those miles?
Very varied. So there's no real structure or plan.
Okay, so no structure or plan?
No, it's just when I can fit it in between work.
Great, yeah, and which is a major thing for most runners, realistically.
Yeah.
We haven't got the luxury of being a professional, etc. So we'd identify, if you can't have certain set days because of work, you would have certain runs and principles behind them. So it might be you'd have 2 more challenging runs, which are always a minimum of 2 days apart, and everything else you do in your week is nice and easy. It doesn't matter where they fall, they're really easy. But the 2 really tough ones must be a minimum of 2 days apart. If that's not feasible, you choose your favourite one, the one you're going to enjoy the most out of it, which might be neither.
Wait, hang on, the challenging run is choose my favourite of the challenges. I'll just choose neither. Right? Let's go for the easy
runs. And then we look at your S&C. So you're doing 3 sessions a week, say.
Yes.
Let's see what you're doing in those 3 sessions.
So actually, I use the Peloton app. So I use a variety of different sort of sessions, generally lighter weights, but quite mixed.
Cool. So great starting point. I'd probably say let's look at what actual exercises you're doing in those sessions. Which ones do you enjoy the most? And then the next step after that, I'd be saying we want to fill the gaps. And usually that entails, particularly for you, would be calf work. You're going to have loads of calf fatigue from the mileage you're covering, so we want to make them bulletproof. That's the starting process, and then we'd work for, say, 4 weeks on that, and then we'd introduce nutrition, and we just pile on all these factors of performance.
That's so interesting. It's really funny to see how quickly you've already started to build up a program for me. And even if the listeners or the viewers don't get anything out of this, I'm getting some free coaching, so I'm quite enjoying it. So it's fantastic. So for you as a business, where do you operate? Can you see people digitally online, or do you have to see them face to face?
Yeah, so I'm based in Solihull, right in the Midlands. You know, it's ideal for travelling, getting around the country. But for the last it's about 5 years, maybe a little bit longer actually, we've offered online coaching. It was great for us, to be honest.
During COVID, I imagine, yeah.
Well, most people were starting at that point, and we'd been doing it for 2 years at that stage.
Oh, nice, okay.
And we have a studio set up a little bit like this. We have apps so I could directly communicate with your watch, and you would basically see my...
It's funny, I can barely use it.
Yeah, that's another thing, whether you would respond to the coaching, but I can communicate to your watch and tell you need to run this part faster now. Oh, you're not doing it, Mike. Why aren't you doing it, Mike?
I think I'd be a little bit scared if it was like, Arj's on my watch. Oh, man, I've got to get out.
And it does have that aspect to it as well. You know, you've got your coach who's monitoring everything. I can see all the statistics coming up. And then we constantly say, don't just look at the metrics, don't just look at the data. You know, I've come off stage and that was one of the topics. Don't just look at the data you get from Strava, etc. But
what do you mean by that? So is it how you feel as opposed to interpreting the data?
Yeah, exactly. So we've become very obsessed with the data. So, you know, I've only hit 41 kilometres this week. Let's round it up to 45.
This is massively, I find this really interesting.
Are you guilty of this? Or?
Yeah, and so are so many of my friends, because we all judge our success by Strava.
Yeah.
And actually, Strava told me the other day that my fitness had decreased by X% since the start of the year. And I'm doing Red January at the moment, which means I've run every single day.
Yeah.
And I was like, how is my fitness getting worse? I mean, that's pretty harsh.
I actually mentioned this to a particular brand of watch, to be honest. I'm not sponsored by them, so should I name them?
Name them, yeah.
Well, I mentioned...
Although we may want to get sponsored from them in the future, so we'll beat it out.
That basically the terms that they use for exactly that scenario can actually be really, really demotivating. It can affect yourself in terms of, what's the point of me doing this actually? I've just done this. I personally did a really tough session and it came back as unproductive.
Yeah, that's so brutal, isn't it? And it may be that you've not slept properly or you've been busy with whatever. Exactly. And actually, if you're out there and you should be proud of that, right?
Exactly that. So we look at those metrics and we take it as just a part of the puzzle, and then we'll have a conversation every month and say, right, how has this gone? How's this gone? And it doesn't just relate to your running performance or your training performance. It has to include an aspect of work. So for some of the people I've worked with, there's confidentiality, so they can't discuss everything, but we can discuss the stresses, because your stress that you go through impacts your performance quite clearly, to be honest.
I totally agree.
So it's about having a well-rounded approach, a holistic approach to help your client.
I could literally talk to you for 17 hours. I'm conscious I'm supposed to keep this to 10 minutes, but I'm not going to, so sorry, Dom, you're going to have to edit this. But from my side, I think one of the things that people are sometimes intimidated with coaching in particular, is A, it's going to cost me a fortune, and B, it's really nerve-wracking, that first meeting.
Yeah.
Like actually putting yourself out there and telling everything. So what do you do to put people at their ease about it?
So first of all, it is definitely intimidating. You're a tall guy as well.
Yeah.
And without doubt, having initial consultations over camera as opposed to face-to-face, being 6'3" with a big beard, was always more daunting for someone to walk up to me at the table, kind of, this is a nice casual setting.
Yeah.
Consultations used to be, there was a table in the middle of us and you're like, I'm looking at you and it's an interview. We had to move away from that. So sofas. Online it's much easier, and it's always about how have you been? I'm not very judgmental. I'm here to support you. In terms of the cost barrier, 100%. It is very, very difficult, and that's why at Performance Physique we have a range of free sessions that people can just access and download. There's 4-minute mornings, which is like daily mobility, which is on YouTube, and we were all over the BBC during lockdown because we were offering all these things for free. When it comes to one-to-one coaching, 100%, I do agree it is expensive, but the one thing I have witnessed time and time again, I've done this for 18 years, is that it's a lot cheaper to go with someone who is really good at the start and do your 12-week block that you want to enjoy, London or whatever event it is, than it is to basically buy all the trainers, the watches, this coach, this session, this session, this session, this session, and suddenly I'm the cheap option. And that's the thing I've noticed in 18 years.
And I totally agree. I think that bespoke approach to yourself as a runner is really, really interesting. And sometimes it's quite easy to buy a product off a shelf for a controlled amount of money because you believe that's going to change you.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a really dangerous approach, in my opinion. I think actually what you need is something much more personalised and tailored. So I'm conscious that Dom's going to tell me off if I run this on any further. So if anybody wants to find out more details about you guys, where should they go?
Just type in Performance Physique online. We'll pop up on Google, or go to performance_physique at Instagram, and we're there.
I think that's amazing. I think actually what I'd like to do, if the pod show carries on, which we would very much hope it does, we'd like to bring you back for a future episode, because I think there's 10,000 things that I want to talk to you about.
Let's
today.
talk about them, Mike. Let's do it.
Thank you for coming on, and we'll hopefully see you again.
Pleasure. Thanks ever so much for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Well done for making it this far. All that's left now is to hear a bit more from our host, and then we're into the outros. Onto the home stretch.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys, for sticking with us throughout another episode of the pod show. So we started off talking about nutrition, and we talked about top tips for nutrition. I want to talk about the worst nutrition you've ever had, and I'm going to kick this one off because I've got a beauty. My first ever ultra marathon was a 50-mile attempt at the North Downs Way, and I did succeed. And basically, at the aid station, someone was giving out fruit, and they were handing out oranges and melon, which turns out are great for an ultra. And I rang my wife, who was crewing me at the time, and I said, "Can you get me some fruit? Because everybody else is having fruit and it looks good." And the only fruit they could get was plums. So they turned up with a bag of 9 plums at the 30-mile aid station. I ate all of them. Let's just say the last 20 miles were not that fun. So what you got, guys? Jamie, what was your worst nutrition mistake?
Okay, half marathon, Berlin.
Yeah.
Night before. Been invited to go out, as we do with a load of other runners. Somebody said, let's go to a pizzeria. I hadn't eaten a pizza for probably a year or something before a race.
What kind of a runner are you if you hadn't eaten a pizza for a year?
Yeah, no, I hadn't. Not before
I don't think we could be friends anymore.
Not before a run.
At least let's find someone else to hang out with.
I
I'm not sure about this, Jamie. You're getting less trustworthy by the minute.
Yeah, sorry. But I had far too much pizza the night before, too late. It was like 10 o'clock, and it was just, I had an absolute disaster. Went off, ran the first 5K. After 6, I could feel that pizza, that margarita was there, and it was an utter, it was an utter disaster. I had to stop. Something happened in central Berlin, which is terrible, and I got to the finish line. I finished, and then I was running with a friend who was a bit slower, so he was coming in a bit later, and I remember getting into the finisher's tent and sitting down, and then and then somebody else would sit near me, and I had to keep on moving away from people. So I was like, this is it was a bad one. That's a bad one.
So the good news is if we had any viewers or listeners up until this point, we probably lost them all in that story. So
all together.
Thanks for sharing, mate.
Being honest, well, you asked. You asked. That's it. You get the answer.
Bloody idiot I am. Anyway, over to you, Elise. What have you got?
Mine's less gross, so that's good. Really just an absence of food. So I went out to Sierra Leone to do a marathon a few years ago, which was a comedy of errors, the whole trip in itself, but I got really sick beforehand, and I just couldn't eat anything. And I remember getting to race morning, and I'd had a strand of spaghetti and half a can of Coke for about 48 hours. And as you can imagine, that wasn't very fun. And then afterwards, so the race was, I had to drop down to the half marathon because I was like, I feel terrible. There's no way I can do a full marathon. But
did you consume anything en route or not?
No, I'd gone such a long way to do it. I was going to at least have to do half. Yeah. But because it was hot, it started really early in the morning. So it started like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I finished before 8. It was obviously a horrible half marathon for me. Yeah. And then the meal at the end was a goat curry. And I was just like, I've not eaten for days. I've just ran this race. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I've got a goat curry.
Yeah. Nothing against goat curry. I'm sure it was delicious.
I'm sure it was delicious, but just at that time of the day.
Goat curry, not at 7 a.m. I'd love a goat curry.
Yeah, and not after not eating. And then, Does anybody else think that we should have a feature which is just Elise's stories? Because I reckon we could do a whole.
We could do a whole
section of
hour
podcast on this.
Yeah.
Get Dave on.
Get Dave on as well. Get him a free lawnmower.
Come in with his fine, mate. Yeah.
I was going to tell a food story about Dave, but I'll save that for another time.
Well, you'll have to come back again, dear listeners and watchers. Okay, well, thank you very much for sticking with us again for this episode of the National Running Show Pod Show in association with Runderwear. Please don't forget you can enter the competition, follow the show notes, it'll tell you what to do. Also, if you head to the Runderwear website, use the code PODSHOW for a 10% discount. Thank you very much for joining us. Join us next week for the last episode of this season. We look forward to hearing you or seeing you. That doesn't work like that, but you know what we mean. See you then.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. Please leave a review if you're listening, and also like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what all your thoughts are if you're watching on YouTube. Oh, and don't forget that our sponsors, Runderwear, are giving away another £100. So please check out the notes in this podcast to find out how you can win, and check out the first 2 episodes to see how you can enter those competitions.